Every day we wake up to news that reminds us of how fragile life truly is. Today, the world lost four remarkable American legends. People who inspired us, entertained us, and shaped our culture in ways we'll never forget. Their stories remind us that greatness isn't about how long we live. It's about the mark we leave behind.
Tragic news has been confirmed today, marking the end of a life that once shook the conscience of a nation. In the quiet hours of this morning, the passing of Jamil Abdullah al-Amin was confirmed, closing a chapter that carried both fire and turmoil. For many, his name brings memories of marches, speeches, and a nation caught between change and conflict. For others, it recalls a story that moved from protest lines to spiritual transformation. His life was not simple, his legacy was not gentle, but his impact cut deep into the American story, leaving a mark that still echoes through debates about justice, identity, and the long road toward equality. Born Hubert Gerald Brown in Baton Rouge in 1943, he grew up in a world shaped by segregation. His early years taught him hard lessons about power and survival. Those lessons carved a sharp voice, and by the time he stepped into the national spotlight in the 1960s, he was ready to challenge the structures that many feared to confront. He became known as H. Rap Brown, a name that sparked emotion in every corner of the country. Some saw him as a truth teller, others saw him as a threat, but everyone heard him. His rise began with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, where he became its fifth chairman. It was a time when young activists were pushing the civil rights movement toward a more urgent tone. Brown's speeches carried that urgency. His words were quick, sharp, and direct, speaking to communities that felt and heard. Violence is as American as cherry pie, he once declared, a line that still appears in documentaries, books, and classrooms. It was not a celebration of violence, it was a mirror held up to history, and millions understood what he meant. His time with SNCC led to a brief but powerful alliance with the Black Panther Party. For 6 months, he served as their Minister of Justice, representing a bridge between two movements driven by frustration and hope. During this period, his statements sparked national debates on race, resistance, and the limits of patience. In those years, the country was burning in many places, and Brown's voice seemed to rise right from the flames, yet his life took sharp turns. In the decades that followed, he stepped away from the political spotlight and embraced Islam, taking the name Jamil Abdullah al-Amin. He no longer stood on national stages. Instead, he devoted himself to faith, discipline, and community leadership. He built a presence rooted in spirituality rather than protest. Many who knew him during this period spoke of a man calmer, more reflective, and deeply committed to guiding those around him. He was a spiritual anchor for our community. One follower said quietly today, "He taught us to build peace inside ourselves." But national attention returned in the year 2000, when a tragic shooting of Fulton County deputies led to a case that remains controversial even today. Al-Amin was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison. The verdict divided opinions. Supporters insisted he had been targeted by a system long at odds with his past. Critics argued that the evidence was clear. Through the years, calls for retrial and re-examination surfaced again and again. Even now, social media carries messages saying the story still feels unfinished. During his years behind bars, he stayed largely out of public visibility. Yet letters and reflections from those who visited him painted the picture of a man living in contemplation. He spoke with calm, a former associate wrote, as if time no longer belonged to him. His life, once defined by energy and confrontation, had shifted into long stretches of stillness. News of his passing has brought a wave of mixed emotions across the country. Former activists from the civil rights era shared tributes mixed with pain and admiration. One historian wrote, "He was one of the last major voices of a generation that demanded America look at itself." Younger generations discovered his speeches online years earlier and often quoted them. While studying the era of Black liberation movements, his influence survived through recordings, archived interviews, and classroom discussions about protest, power, and the cost of resistance. His critics, too, have spoken today. Some recalled moments of fear and division sparked by his more confrontational rhetoric. Others revisited the events that led to his imprisonment. These reactions are part of his story, a reminder that he lived inside conflict as much as he lived inside history. His life cannot be told without acknowledging the fractures he left behind, but neither can it be told without recognizing the communities he inspired. Through every version of himself, activist, warrior, writer, imam, one thread remained, and desire to confront the reality of his time. His autobiography carried the stark title Die Nigger Die. It was a reflection of the rage and weariness he saw in Black communities. During the height of the civil rights struggle, the book became a symbol of the era's raw honesty. Students still read it today to understand how protest felt from the Inside, not from textbooks or documentaries, but from someone who lived in the fire. In his later years, especially after converting to Islam, his tone shifted from confrontation to internal strength. He focused on discipline, moral clarity, and the duties of faith. Followers described him as patient and composed. Neighbors from his Atlanta neighborhood once recalled how he helped settle disputes, quietly, without attention, using only his presence and calm voice. These small stories rarely made headlines, but they reveal a part of his life that many never saw, a side shaped by reflection. Instead of rebellion. As news spread of his passing, a message appeared on social media from a former civil rights organizer. He was complicated, he was flawed, but he believed in something fiercely. That belief shaped a generation. Another tribute simply read, "Rest in power, Brother Jamil. History will judge your heart." These messages show the emotional divide that followed him throughout his life. To some, he will always be a symbol of fire. To others, a symbol of transformation. But no one can deny that he stood at the center of some of America's most defining moments. His journey captures the tension of an era when hope and conflict walked hand in hand in marches, in speeches, in courtrooms, and later in silence. He represented a country struggling to define justice. His voice may have softened over the years, but his early words remain etched in the nation's collective memory. They continue to challenge listeners to question how far society has come, and how far it still must go. Today, as we reflect on his passing, what remains is a long shadow of a man who lived through the storm and left behind a legacy built on conviction. He will be remembered not only for the controversies that surrounded him, but for the conversations he forced America to have, conversations about race, identity, power, and the meaning of freedom. His life reminds future generations that activism is never simple, and that those who push hardest against history often carry the heaviest burdens. Even now, his speeches echo through old recordings, their rhythm steady, their meaning sharp. They belong to a time when the country was changing faster than anyone could fully understand. But they also belong to today, as new generations continue the same struggle with new voices and new strategies. Jamil Abdullah, al-Amin's story is part of that long chain, linking past to present. His chapter in American history has closed, but the questions he raised remain open. His fire may have faded, but the sparks he left behind continue to influence activists, scholars, and communities searching for purpose. In the end, that is the legacy of a man whose life refused to be silent. From the roar of protest to the warmth of melody, the story now turns to a man whose voice brought a different kind of unity, one carried by music. Sad news has been confirmed today as the music world mourns the passing of a man whose voice once carried pure, simple joy. Mark Volman, the warm-hearted co-founder of the Turtles and one half of Flo Eddie, has left us silence where harmony once lived. His passing at 78 closes a chapter that began in the bright days of 1960s pop music, when simple melodies could lift entire generations. Today, fans across the world look back on his life with gratitude, remembering the laughter, the color, and the comfort that his voice brought into their homes. His story began in Los Angeles, where music drifted through garages, school gyms, and neighborhood concerts. It was here that a young Mark Volman picked up a guitar and discovered a love that would shape the rest of his life. Friends later recalled that he was never the loudest person in the room, but he was always the happiest. When a song was playing, his passion grew naturally, leading him into a small band of dreamers that would eventually become the Turtles. The group took shape during a time when pop music felt wide open. There were no strict rules, only possibilities. Volman and his bandmates spent long nights experimenting with sounds, writing lyrics, and imagining what their place in the music world might be. No one in the room knew that their voices would soon become part of American culture, but they believed in the music, and that belief carried them forward. In 1967, that belief blossomed into something unforgettable. Happy Together, a bright, hopeful love song, became a #1 hit. Its opening chords were instantly recognizable, and its chorus felt like sunlight breaking through a cloudy day. Volman's harmonies gave the song its warmth. His voice, paired with Howard Kalin's lead, created a sound that felt friendly, familiar, and safe. Even today, listeners describe the song as a memory they never lived, but still somehow recognize. Throughout the late 1960s, the Turtles delivered hit after hit, becoming known for their upbeat style and emotional lightness. Their music created a space where listeners could escape from the chaos of the world. And in the middle of it all stood Mark Volman, the steady presence, the gentle spirit, the musician who loved what he did more than he loved being famous. In the years that followed, Volman and Kalin reinvented themselves, forming Flo Eddie. The duo toured with major artists including Frank Zappa, bringing their humor and harmonies into new musical worlds. Their collaborations shaped an era of experimental rock, blending comedy with artistry in a way that only they could pull off. Fans admire their willingness to evolve, to laugh, and to treat music not as a business, but as a joyful craft. Later in life, Volman stepped into teaching. He shared his skills at universities, guiding young musicians who carry dreams as fragile as his once were. Students often said he treated every class like a rehearsal room, filled with patience and encouragement. He taught us to love the process, not just the applause. One former student wrote today, his kindness stayed with them long after the lessons ended. The news of his passing brought an outpouring of love from across the music community. Old bandmates, former students, and devoted fans all shared their messages. One musician wrote, "He made the world happier without even trying. That was his gift." Another message simply said, "Thank you for giving us a soundtrack for better days." These tributes show how much Volman meant to people far beyond the stage. His career stretched across decades, yet he remained humble through it all. He spoke often about the joy of collaboration, the privilege of performing, and the magic of a crowd singing along. He never tried to be larger than life. Instead, he tried to be present, honest, and grateful. That humility made his success feel even more special. As he grew older, health challenges began to appear, but he continued to stay connected to music. Interviews from recent years reveal a gentle perspective on aging. He said that time had softened him, giving him more appreciation for the simple pleasures. A warm conversation, a familiar melody, a quiet moment. These reflections show a man at peace with his journey, aware of the legacy he was leaving behind. Happy Together followed him everywhere. Its popularity never faded. It played in movies, commercials, television shows, and parades. Younger generations discovered it through social media, turning it into a song that never belonged to just one time period. Volman once said he was grateful that a piece of his work could still make strangers smile decades later. That kind of connection is the rarest form of immortality. In the middle of his career, he faced challenges with record labels and contracts. These moments could have broken his spirit, but they didn't. Instead, he learned how to navigate the business side of music without letting it dim his passion. He became an advocate for artists' rights, using his experience to protect others from the same struggles. This quiet form of service earned him deep respect within the industry. Today, those who knew him personally describe him as a man who carried warmth like a soft melody. He cared about people. He listened closely. He gave his time generously. Whether he was on stage in front of thousands or sitting with students in a classroom, he stayed true to himself. That consistency shaped the trust people placed in him. One of the most shared tributes today comes from a longtime friend who wrote, "Mark always found the joy in the moment. Even when things were tough, he looked for light." That sense of optimism now feels like a final gift to the world he leaves behind. His passing reminds us of the power of gentle voices, the kind that do not demand attention but earn it through sincerity. His work with the Turtles helped define an era of music that still feels timeless. His later years as Flo and Eddie kept the spirit of creativity alive, and his decades as a teacher ensured that his wisdom would continue long after the stage lights faded. Even now, as fans replay his songs online, thousands of comments appear beneath the videos. People share memories of road trips, weddings, childhood moments, and peaceful afternoons touched by his music. These stories create a collective tribute, echoing the same message. His voice made life feel lighter. Mark Volman's journey shows that greatness does not always come from volume or force. Sometimes it comes from harmony, humor, and kindness. He lived a life filled with all three, and in return, the world gave him love that stretched across generations. His final chapter brings reflection, not sorrow, because even in passing, he leaves behind something that cannot fade. His melodies continue to play in homes and concerts, and in the quiet corners of daily life. They carry warmth into new mornings and offer comfort during difficult days. That is the true legacy of a musician, a presence that lingers long after the voice has gone silent. As we say farewell, his life stands as a reminder that simple songs can hold the biggest memories, and that joy, when shared with others, becomes a gift that outlives its giver. And from the joy of song we move toward the strength of service, a voice that carried the hopes of a city. The news came quietly this morning, carried in a soft wave of messages across Detroit, a city now mourning one of its most trusted voices for many. The passing of Carolyn Cheeks Kilpatrick felt like the end of a long chapter in the story of Detroit's hope. She was a woman who believed deeply in her city, and for decades, she stood at the front lines of its progress. Her work was steady, patient, and always focused on lifting the community she loved. Carolyn's journey began far from the applause of public office. Before she ever stepped into Congress, she spent years in Detroit's classrooms. She was an educator first, shaped by the belief that every child deserved a fair chance. Students often remembered her as a teacher who listened, really listened. When life became heavy, those early years would guide everything she later fought for: education, opportunity, a fair shot at dignity. She carried these principles into every room she entered. When she made her way into public service, Detroit saw not just a leader, but a woman who understood the struggles of everyday families. Her voice in the Michigan House of Representatives grew steadily, shaped by her belief that progress should never leave the most vulnerable behind. And when she reached the halls of the U.S. Congress, she brought with her the same steady determination that once filled her classroom. Colleagues often spoke about her warmth and calm presence. One former staff member said she had a way of making you feel that the work was bigger than all of us, but she still found time to ask if you were okay. Those small moments became part of her quiet legacy, proof that kindness and leadership could live in the same space. During her years in Washington, she advocated for Detroit with a fierce loyalty. Her focus stayed on education, community programs, and federal support for families trying to rebuild their futures. She understood that cities rise when their people rise, and she carried that belief into every decision. Her work was rarely loud. Instead, it was patient, steady, built on conversations, negotiations, and the quiet confidence of someone who knew the path forward might take time. People often said her leadership felt like standing near a calm river, strong, enduring, and always moving. Family members shared heartfelt words after her passing. Her daughter said in a statement, "My mother believed in Detroit even on its hardest days. She believed in its people, and she never stopped fighting for them." That belief became her anchor, even through moments of political pressure and public scrutiny. Detroit's residents remember her as someone who showed up. Town halls, community meetings, school events. She listened to seniors who needed help with housing. She listened to young people who felt unheard. She listened to single mothers fighting to keep their families together. And every time, she left with a note, a plan, or a promise to bring their concerns back to the floor of Congress. These memories now form the chorus of her tribute, a portrait of a leader who respected every voice. As the news spread today, tributes began pouring in. One community activist wrote, "She taught us that representation is not a seat in a room. It's a responsibility to carry the dreams of the people who placed you there." These words echo the very heart of her career. In her later years, Carolyn continued to mentor younger leaders, encouraging them to shape the future with compassion and courage. She knew that real change does not come from a single generation. It is handed down, taught, and carried forward by those willing to serve. Her passing leaves a space that feels heavy. Detroit has lost not only a former congresswoman, but a voice that reminded people that progress is possible, even in difficult times. She stood for a Detroit where every family had hope, where every child had opportunity, and where every community had someone fighting for them at the national level. Those who worked beside her say she carried herself with grace, even in the most challenging moments. Her ability to stay calm, to speak softly yet with purpose, made her stand out in a world often driven by noise. She moved differently, guided by empathy, not ambition. Her life reminds us that the quiet leaders often leave the deepest impact. Her victories may not have always made headlines, but they left marks on families, schools, and neighborhoods that will last for generations. In remembering Carolyn Cheeks Kilpatrick, Detroit reflects on a woman who turned public service into a lifelong promise, a promise to uplift, to protect, to believe. And now, that promise becomes her legacy. Her story will continue to inspire future leaders who walk the same roads she once walked, carrying the same belief that a single voice guided by hope and conviction can strengthen an entire city. Detroit mourns today, but it also celebrates a life that mattered, a life shaped by compassion, service, and unwavering faith in the community she called home. And as her chapter comes to a close, the city she loved carries forward the light she leaves behind. As civic voices fade, science reminds us that human curiosity can push beyond the limits of time itself. The world woke up today to the quiet news that one of science's most brilliant minds has left us. Sir John Gurdon, the man who taught humanity that even the oldest cells could return to youth, is being remembered with deep respect across the scientific community. His passing feels like the end of a remarkable chapter in modern biology. For decades, his work pushed the boundaries of what people believed was possible, and through careful experiments and quiet determination, he reshaped the way the world understands life itself. Sir John's journey began far from the spotlight of global recognition. As a young student, he was once told he had no future in science. A school report famously said he would never succeed in the field he loved, yet, instead of letting those words close a door, he carried them with him as motivation. That early doubt became one of the most powerful stories in scientific history. Years later, inside a quiet laboratory, he conducted the experiment that would change everything. He took the nucleus of a mature frog cell and placed it into an egg cell. Against all expectations, it developed into a living tadpole. It was an achievement that challenged the long-held belief that mature cells could not be reversed. This discovery became the foundation of what the world now knows as nuclear reprogramming. His work quietly transformed modern medicine. It laid the path for stem cell research, regenerative therapies, and the idea that damaged tissues could one day be repaired. Scientists began to imagine possibilities that once felt like science fiction. Colleagues say his curiosity never faded. One researcher who trained under him shared, "He had this childlike wonder. He asked questions no one else thought to ask, and he treated every answer like a new beginning." That sense of wonder became the heart of his life's work. Sir John carried himself with calm humility, even after receiving the Nobel Prize in 2012. He rarely spoke about his achievements with pride. Instead, he spoke about the students he hoped to inspire and the mysteries still waiting to be solved. Those who knew him say he valued curiosity over talent, patience over pressure, and exploration over certainty. As tributes began to appear today, one message from a former student stood out. He showed us that failure is not a wall. It's the first step toward understanding. These words reflect the simple, powerful lessons he passed down to generations of young scientists. In the middle of his career, Sir John often spoke about the responsibility of science to heal, to explore, and to question. He believed that breakthroughs were not accidents. They were the result of years of quiet work, steady focus, and a willingness to rethink everything. His life moved between the lab bench and the lecture hall. He guided students gently, often encouraging them to challenge the rules written by those before them. Even in his later years, he walked through research centers with the same soft curiosity he had as a young scientist. People remember how he would stop to look closely at a microscope slide, lifting it as if it were a window into a new world. Throughout his career, Sir John remained deeply committed to the possibility of renewal. He believed that nature carried far more flexibility than people realized, and that science had only scratched the surface of its hidden wisdom. His work offered hope to millions living with degenerative diseases. It suggested that damaged cells might one day be reborn, that lost functions might be restored, and that aging itself could be better understood. This hope is now part of his legacy. His passing leaves a quiet emptiness in the field he helped build. Scientists around the world are reflecting not only on his discoveries, but on the spirit he brought to every experiment: calm, curious, steady, always willing to ask the question that others avoided. Another colleague wrote today, "He never rushed. He believed that good science grows slowly, like life itself." That gentle philosophy shaped his entire career. As the world looks back on his countless contributions, one truth becomes clear. Sir John Gurdon did not simply make discoveries. He changed the direction of biological science. He turned an impossible idea into a foundation stone of modern research. His achievements will continue to ripple forward for decades. Every new therapy, every breakthrough in tissue repair, every advancement in regenerative medicine carries a piece of his legacy. And beyond the laboratories and awards, he leaves behind a story of resilience, a reminder that even when the world doubts someone, curiosity can rewrite the future. Today, his family, friends, and students are mourning a scholar who never stopped exploring, a scientist who believed that life held endless secrets, waiting for someone brave enough to search for them. His career shows that time can bend backward, forward, and even pause when the right question is asked. In many ways, he proved that renewal is not only a biological process, but a human one. As the chapter of Sir John Gurdon's life comes to a close, the world remembers a man who reversed the rules of nature and invited humanity to imagine what might be possible. And while he may no longer walk among the laboratories he loved, his work continues quietly, steadily inside every discovery that brings life back to damaged cells. His legacy is a testament to the power of curiosity, patience, and hope. As we reach the end of this journey, we look back on the lives that shape today's world, and we carry forward their light into the stories still waiting to be told.